Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope you're all doing well today. Today I've got some terrifying encounters to share with you. Now, I know I say that quite often, but since that Fleshgait encounter a couple of days ago, I've been searching the archives for something just as creepy, and I think I found them. Before we get into those encounters, though, a couple links I'd like to share. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help this channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that really don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. I also started a GoFundMe page to help raise some money for urbex, cryptid hunting, and ghost hunting equipment. So far, I have an SLS cam, an EVP recorder, and some trail cams. Now I'm saving up for some thermal imaging cams. If that's anything that you're interested in helping with, that link is also in the description below. Now I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with these terrifying cryptid encounters. Shall we? Today's first cryptid encounter. This is in northern Indiana for anyone who is interested. Think rural South Bend, 30 minutes out from the city. My boyfriend saw a 6-foot, scrawny, naked, dirty, pale crawler with a mask of skin stretched over its sunken eye sockets and an open mouth standing in the woods by his house. Even after it ran away, he could also still hear it breaking its way through the brush. Looking back, the signs were almost always there. Back when I was in elementary school, the entryway to our basement was walled off and had a door, which has since been torn down to make the room more open and leaving the opening to the basement a staircase surrounded by a banister in the center of the room. On occasion, the air caught behind the basement door would hold a very strange and distinct smell. It wasn't mold or rot or any other normal basement smell. Instead, coming across as a strange combination of slight fish, fruit, and dirt. My mom found the smell disgusting. I found it strangely comforting. My dad made no comment, and my sister claimed to not notice it. In any case, the smell stopped appearing after the walls and door of the staircase was removed, perhaps allowing the air to flow more readily and not allow the scent to build up. I distinctly remember a strange occurrence that I had originally written off as nothing until more evident encounters began later in the years. I was late into elementary school, about 5th or 6th grade. We owned cheap, hard plastic drinking cups that everyone in the house used on a regular basis, usually leaving them out on the kitchen island for reuse. One night I was lying trying to fall asleep and I heard a very distinct plastic clunk drag noise of one of the cups on the table being nonchalantly placed back down on the table. At first I assumed it was another family member getting a late night drink, but after no one walked past my door to return to bed, all of our bedrooms were at the end of a single hallway, I became nervous. Apparently, my mother felt the same way because a few seconds later, she asked from her bed, "Was that either of you kids?" My dad was asleep next to her, and both my sister and I responded in a negative. We all quietly shrugged it off and tried to return back to sleep. At some point in the middle school, my longtime friend Nadia was relaying a story of the adventures she had experienced with her friends. Nadia lived down the street and around the corner from my house, about a half a mile from my home. We always counted ourselves as neighbors despite the distance, rural Indiana being what it is. Between our homes is a decent-sized woodland owned by a man who I have never met and only heard to be referred to as George, though I know for a fact that that's not his real name. George's house is located in the center of the woods. though there are some gaps in the trees where you can glimpse his rundown outbuildings and barns from across the fields in my backyard when the corn doesn't block your line of sight. It's a common joke or rumor among Nadia and her friends, as well as the other kids living on the block, to refer to George as the cannibal, due to his reclusive nature and creepy property. Nadia and her friends had at one point decided to sneak through the woods to get a better look at his house and whatever was going on there. However, mere yards into the forest, they encountered a crisscrossing network of tripwires that appeared to be connected to various chimes and bells. Upon coming across this primitive alarm system, they promptly chickened out and abandoned their quest. After hearing the story, I kept an eye on George's woods whenever I walked past and confirmed that there was indeed an array of wires and chimes that could be spotted through the bare patches of trees. These alarms are still in place to the very recent past. At the time, this was just something spooky that happened, but in retrospect, we wonder if those were in place to keep something other than people out. It's worth mentioning that the woods near this house are some of the last woods in the area, the rest now just being cornfields. There was always a patch of ground on our property near the edge of our woods that I always felt was strange. It was a perfect circle of grass that refused to grow taller than a half an inch, no matter how long it went without mowing. It was natural, live grass, and always soft to the touch. I was always curious about what it was, but had a very strong, instinctual urge to, under no circumstance, dig up whatever was under that round patch. Another ground-related incident occurred right before the encounters began in full swing. In the spring of 2013, the end of my junior year of high school, we noticed through the gap of trees that George had procured a large backhoe, and over the course of a month had created a very large pit, if a pile of dirt was anything to judge by. Nadia and I joked that it was a massive grave for the gnawed-on remains of the cannibal's victims. I still have no idea what purpose the thing has, but you can still see the huge dirt pile and the edge of the hole from my backyard. Based on the timing of what happened next, I have a strong feeling the digging of the hole had something to do with the uptick in activity at my house and the surrounding area. Summer of 2013, when things began in earnest. I was bored, lonely, and unemployed teenager with nothing much to do. As such, I spent a great deal of my time going on walks up and down the country roads and down my block. My normal route was a left out my driveway, a long jaunt to the end of my road, a right turn, and then another jaunt to the creatively named Mile Tree, located exactly a mile from my house. Shocking. I would then turn around and return home to waste more time. Around late June, these walks started taking on a fully more ominous feel, however. About a half mile down the road from my house is a section of pavement that had washed out a few winters before, about 2010, maybe 2011. It had been shoddily repaired, a lump of asphalt and concrete chunks that created a hump in the road, traversing the sunken depression of swamp that had caused it to collapse in the first place. This swampy depression was in turn surrounded with more of the ever-present cornfields. It came on very suddenly. One day things were normal, and the next they weren't. Without fail, every time I reached the wrecked section of road, everything would go silent and there was no sign of wildlife. No birds on the telephone wires, no frogs in the mud, not even a buzzing of insects. There was a sickening, intense feeling of being watched. Occasionally there'd be a soft sound of something moving through the cornfields on the south side of the road, often accompanied by an odd metallic scraping noise. My road ends on a gentle hill about 500 yards past the wet depression. Walking towards the hill, nothing seemed out of place, but on your way back home, if you looked back at the slope, there would be a very distinct dark shadow cast halfway up the hill, a nondescript circle shape like those drawn under a character by a lazy animator. I was not the only one to notice these things. Any friend I took with me on a walk down that route would always point out the same things: the eerie silence, the feeling of watching eyes, and the inexplicable dark shape on the hill. I would never point out any details or hint that something was off, curious as to whether it was all in my head or not, but without fail they all saw the same things around us. Things only picked up from there. On the return trip of one of my walks, I noticed a baby bird dead in the middle of the road. It was underdeveloped, eyes closed, and bearing no feathers whatsoever. Far too small to have tried to fly from the nest and ended up there by itself. I wrote it off as being hauled there by a cat or a coyote and moved on. But about 30 feet ahead, I happened across another, small and naked with bulging closed eyes. In another 30 feet, I found another. I hadn't noticed these birds before, only on my return trip. I considered myself to be a very observant person, and dead birds have always been somewhat a bad omen in my eyes. So I was surprised that I hadn't seen them earlier. I grew more suspicious as I continued home, as every 30 feet or so there was another dead bird, too young to have gotten there on its own. This trail of birds continued all the way back to my house and up my driveway, ending on the concrete approach in front of our garage. Neither our cat or dog, both being famous for eating any dead thing they could get their paws on, would approach the rotten little things. After the trail of birds, my walks got considerably less eerie. The muddy section of road was back to its noisy self, and I no longer felt watching eyes or heard something stalking through the cornfields. This is because, unfortunately, those sensations had migrated to our woods. I tried my absolute best not to let the feelings get to me, spending no less time outdoors, but it was always there in the back of my mind. Some night in early July, a motorist killed a deer in front of our house, the impact flinging the thing into the tall grass on the edge of our forest bordering the road. It was far enough out of sight and out of mind that we didn't bother moving the animal. It lay there concealed by the grass for about a day. After the carcass was gone, replaced with heavy drag marks and flattened grass heading into the woods. Assuming coyotes had decided to have themselves a meal, and being the macabre little shit that I am, I gave in to curiosity and followed the trail into the woods. About 15 yards in, I found the ruined remains of the back half of the deer, mostly devoured. A few feet away was the front half of the animal, hanging by its front legs and chin from a tree, a good 5 feet of clearance between its shredded midsection and the ground below. I'm unaware of any breed of coyote that leaves that much of a meal for later and hangs their prize up in a tree beyond their reach. There were also no reports of any large cats or other predators capable of moving a full-size deer carcass up a tree trunk in the area. In any case, I decided that it was time to move along and go back inside. The first face-to-face encounter occurred just a few days after I found the deer. My dad returned from work and presented me with a machete that he had bought to clear brush and do yard work. It was cheap and dull, but it was a machete, and I was a high school kid, so of course I was excited about it. I decided to take the thing for a spin and headed out onto the trail through the woods, hacking at weeds and vines on the side of the trail. As I continued further down the path, the feeling of being watched returned in force, worse than it had ever been before. It was enough to make my chest tighten and the hair on my back of my neck stand up. I reached the point in the trail that enters a small pine grove, dark and quiet, even in the middle of the day. Stretched across the entrance of the grove was a large spider web, about head and chest height. Deciding that respect for the spider's home was a good enough excuse to get out of there, I promptly turned and left. But I was bored and dumb, and the other portions of the trail didn't have any weeds that were satisfyingly chopped to bits, so eventually I decided that I would just go back and duck under the web, despite the feelings of primal terror emanating from that part of the woods. As it turned out, I didn't need to duck at all. When I got to the entrance of the pine trees, the spider web was broken right down the middle, dangling to either side of the trail. Whatever walked through the web had to be at least as tall as I was, considering the web was level to my face. I stepped through into the dark and quickly made my way through to the light on the other side, where the periphery of woods and the pavement of the road waited. Though my arms felt weak, my instincts were on overdrive. I decided to turn to the side of the path and chop down one last vine before calling it quits. I turned to the side of the path, and through the corner of my eye, I saw it. I snapped my head to the side and looked right at the thing. It appeared that we both were stunned, me at having seen it and it having been spotted. It was standing stock still in the center of the path, about 20 feet behind me. It was as tall or a little taller than I, probably 6 foot tops. It was extremely scrawny and stood naked, though I saw no evidence of genitalia. The skin was dirty pale, its face was a mask of skin stretched over sunken eye sockets, and an open mouth, not unlike the features of someone wearing a morph suit, though with the autonomy more defined. After a few seconds of stunned silence, we both snapped out of our shock, with me making a break for the road and the thing crashing through the underbrush, heading deeper into the woods. I was almost convinced the whole thing was some sort of vivid hallucination, but that hope quickly ended as I realized that not only had I seen the thing, I could also still hear it breaking its way through the brush and twigs, heading away from me into the forest. I was understandably pretty shaken up by the whole encounter, but I tried to shake it off, mostly for the sake of denial. I didn't bring it up with anyone else in the family, fully expecting that they wouldn't believe me anyway. Later that night, I went to bed. The floor of my room was strewn with various sheets of paper and drawings. In the middle of the night, I woke up with a sinking feeling in my gut. I lie there facing the wall, not daring to roll over. There was a very distinct noise of someone stepping on one of the sheets of paper on the ground. I'm not sure how long I was stuck there, but eventually I drifted back to sleep, likely due to exhaustion. The next morning, when I checked the ground, one of the papers on the floor was crumpled and appeared trodden on. Today's second terrifying encounter. I'm from Roswell, New Mexico. Born and raised, I grew up dealing with bullshit alien nonsense my entire life. The whole town is a tourist attraction for people who believe in aliens and believe there actually was a UFO that crashed here in the early 50s. Gift shops, cheap souvenirs, strange people, galore. I'm a very logical thinker, and I've had a lot of strange things happen to me in the past, but have always dealt with them in this can logically be explained mindset since I can remember. But what I'm about to write about is something I can't explain, and it also something that I'm hesitant to even think about anymore. I was camping with my cousin Cam, 17 at the time, same age as I was, his little brother Nick, and my aunt and uncle. We were near Cloud Croft, New Mexico, up in the mountains. My uncle had just bought a new camper, and we decided to go camping with it for the weekend. The weather was beautiful, and me and my cousins decided to bring a tent to sleep in instead of the camper so we could be shitheads in peace. We set out our tent about 60 yards away from the camper and the fire that was right outside of it. Towards the end of the first night, and after a long day of exploring, we all decided to lie down for the night. We were not camping on an actual campsite. It was a spot my uncle had found years back, and it was a perfect spot to set up a camp. It was about 3 a.m. The fire was completely out. My cousins and I were still awake. Nick, being the youngest, was trying to stay up and be cool with us, but ended up falling asleep. It was only Cam and I awake now. We were just shooting the shit, talking about hot chicks from school, brilliant ideas for things that needed to be invented, male birth control, and eventually slowly started to fall asleep as well. All of a sudden, we heard this blood-curdling scream from the distance. Probably the same distance away from the camper was, only in the opposite direction. Myself and Cam both picked up our heads off the pillow and said almost simultaneously, "What the fuck was that?" It wasn't a bear, it wasn't a fox, it was big. The closest way I know how to describe it is a mixture between a banshee and a rabid peacock. Its voice was deep and echoed through the deep woods. It let out another blood-curdling shriek, and we both sat upright on our blow-up mattress. Immediately after the screech, it started clicking, an odd, deep clicking sound coming from the back of its throat. It was loud enough to hear from the distance as well. We were scared, and neither of us had no idea what it could be. We waited a second, both quiet as mouse. It let out another scream, followed by a series of clicks, but it seemed to be closer now, maybe 10 yards closer. I looked at Cam, and he looked just as shocked as I was feeling. I was trying to convince myself it was a bird of some sort or a mountain cat. Then I heard it walking. It was walking on 2 feet, and I could distinctly hear it. It even sounded big, taking huge strides, crackling branches, leaves under its feet as it walked. It sounded like it was coming close to us. It screeched, clicked loudly again. I could tell it was about halfway to us now. Suddenly there was another scream. Clicks came from another direction, sounding just as close as the other creature. It sounded more aggressive, more angry and dominant. The first creature let off a series of clicks as well, then it hit me. They're communicating. At this point I was terrified, and so was Cam. I had an axe under the blow-up mattress, but I was too afraid to get up and grab it. Then both of the creatures started walking towards us, both on 2 legs. Not screaming or clicking, but it sounded like they were trying to be sneaky and sneak up on the tent. They were getting closer and closer. The first one screamed loudly. I could tell it was roughly 15 yards away now. And so was the other creature. After screaming, it started clicking again, and the other one clicked back at it. They were both walking closer and closer to the tent. I could hear them both stepping on limbs and leaves, but I could feel the ground thud with each step they took. I was panicking, frantically looking for my axe, while Cam was frantically trying to wake up his little brother. I couldn't find my axe anywhere. I realized I had left it near the campfire because we were using it to cut pieces of wood for the fire. Nick wasn't waking up, and they were getting closer and closer to the tent. Eventually, Cam and myself froze. The second one had stopped about 10 feet away from the tent, but the first one was walking right up to the tent. As soon as it was right outside of the tent, I yelled as loud as I could out of pure fear, "Get the fuck away from us! Leave us alone!" It stopped. It was right outside. I could almost see it through the tent. It was huge, tall enough to lean over and look through the top of the tent if it wanted to. I could tell it was slim, and the creature was heavy because of how tall it was. I could feel its energy, and it was very negative. I felt the vibes of the universe, and they were telling me that whatever these things were, they were not there just to say hi or steal our hot dogs. I was frozen. They were right outside, and the moon was covered by clouds, so moonlight was no longer shining anywhere. I couldn't even hear him breathe. It was silent. The second one clicked from behind us, still 10 feet away or so from the tent. The first one didn't move. It didn't make a single sound. And it was probably a foot away from the tent. My heart was beating so hard I thought I was going to pass out. All of a sudden, it took 2 huge steps back. The second one let out a scream so loud it hurt our ears. I immediately burst into tears. The second creature took off into the woods, pounding the ground underneath it, running on 2 legs faster than Usain Bolt himself. The first one apparently turned around and walked away back into the deep woods. I waited until I completely heard its footsteps disappear until I unzipped the tent. threw little Nick over my shoulder, and we booked it towards the camper. We got inside and woke up my aunt and uncle. They had no idea what was going on and urged us to take our asses to bed. We slept in the camper the next 2 nights, and I didn't leave the campsite for the rest of the trip. I don't know what we encountered that night, but all I know is it was definitely not of this kind. It was not a human, not a bear, not a 4-legged animal, and it was definitely not a rabid peacock. I was scared. I was scared so bad, and I had never been since. And its energy and screams still haunt me to this day. Well, like Matthew McConaughey says, all right, all right, all right. They were some scary-ass stories. We're in Indiana on the first one, so definitely a Fleshgait, something not pleasant. The trail of birds, almost like, the thing lived in these woods about a half a mile away from this person's home and then traveled, to their woods. So it could have been a way for it to remember its way home, or maybe an offering, like, hey, I'm coming to your house. You know how cats do that sometimes. They'll pick up a dead mouse and leave it for you at the front door. This thing just left dead birds all the way up to your garage. I mean, no thanks. I think the real reason why it ran was because it wasn't on its home turf. Initially, it was, like I said before, a half a mile away. Now it's on your turf, and maybe it felt threatened or just not sure, and it took off. It was definitely not because of the machete. I don't think cryptids of that nature fear weapons, unless like maybe a dogman or a Sasquatch that have studied hunters and watched them. Just wow, stay out of your woods completely, or move, or just go out back with an AR-15 and light that son of a bitch up. The second encounter, you really fooled yourself believing in nothing there. Aliens did crash in Roswell in the 1950s. There's proof it's not a weather balloon. Can you imagine, like, the fear of being stuck in a tent and these two creatures are screaming and clicking? The clicking is enough, man. Don't click at me, you freak. Fucking run away. Just get away from me. Oh, God. I hate when things click. Watching scary movies and there's clicking and you're in the woods. It's just not right, Just don't click. Yell. Scream. Don't click. But, I mean, who in their right mind would put a hatchet under their blow-up mattress? And then forget it and, it's by the fire. Makes no sense. But they're kids. Kids don't make sense. Definitely a creepy encounter. I don't even know. Fleshgait, Skinwalker. I mean, we are in New Mexico, so that's always a bonus there, I guess. I don't know. I'm thinking it was a Skinwalker. 2 though? 2. That kind of doesn't make sense, Jeff. Anyway, now I'm just rambling. Like a woman, I like to talk. No offense to any women out there. I am not a chauvinist prick. I love y'all equally, men and women. And no, not that way. Nothing against that way. Free country. But now I'm just like tongue tied and rambling like an idiot. So Skinwalker possibly, or 2 Fleshgaits, 2 Skinwalkers, or just don't ever go to that mountain in New Mexico again, and don't click anymore ever. I don't know. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this upload. I know I did, and I'm sorry for the rambling at the end. Just a little bored tonight. Just trying to think of, I don't even know. Anyway, with that, guys, I bid you farewell. Oh, wait, one more thing, Mr. Rambles. I am working on a couple Dogman encounters. They were sent to me, and I gotta rewrite them. A lot of times when someone sends me an encounter, it's nothing against them, but they're typing it and it, comes not punctuated or not spelled correctly, and I made that mistake of reading encounters sometimes fresh and not looked over, and had the hell of a time trying to record it. So I'm working on a couple of those. I got one really terrifying one coming out of Texas, and I'm trying to get in touch with this person from Ohio to let me share their encounter with the Dogman. I have it, but they actually asked me not to narrate it for a while, and I've literally been sitting on it for 2 years at least. Now I'm gonna shut up, and with that, guys, have a great night, and thank you for all your support. Peace.